Hello everyone, welcome back. Xiaoling here, and this is the Intel report. So in this episode, we're going to be looking at patch 5.2 for Rainbow Six Siege. For those of you who didn't watch the preview stream or haven't yet read through the patch notes, there are a fair amount of changes in this patch. The list is quite extensive, so I'm not actually going to go through everything. I just want to cover some of the major points that might be of interest to some of you. And as usual, I'm going to leave the link to the patch notes in the description box below for those of you who want to get into all the little details and nitty-gritty of these particular changes. First up is Tachanka has now received a 500 hit point turret on his mounted machine gun, which is going to make him significantly more useful and difficult to kill, and very good at holding specific angles and specific locations, which I think is good. I think we are going to see an increase in Tachanka's pick rate, and yeah, I'm very curious to see where people and what kind of locations people are going to find in order to put him to good use. There's also a new map, Bartlett University map, which those of you who've played through all 10 situations will remember. It's been redesigned with regard to destructible environments and things like that, specifically for PvP and PvE. So this is going to be very interesting, and you can never be sad that there's a new map in the rotation. Variety is always a good thing in my books. Moving on to some other general tweaks and improvements, there are operator changes, weapon balancing changes, and other improvements. As you'd expect with basically every patch, there's always a host of other fixes. So first up is Fuse, and he's getting another cluster charge, so that's going to put his cluster charge limit up to 3. Fuse was an interesting operator. I always felt that his cluster charges weren't effective enough at clearing out areas, but with this change I think it's going to shake things up a little bit. The original range of the cluster charges was 2.5 meters. They have increased that to 4.2 meters, so that's nearly double the range. As it was before, the lethal area for all armor types was 1.2 meters. From 1.2 meters to 2.5 meters, it would be non-lethal to everyone except light armor, who only suffered non-lethal damage from 2 to 2.5 meters. Now that they've expanded the zone of non-lethal up to 4.2, this I think is definitely going to help Fuse clear out areas and clear out rooms with these charges, especially now that he has an additional one as well. So I'm curious to see how much more often Fuse is going to be used. Bandit has received an additional battery because they felt that the battery was relatively easy to get rid of in most situations, and the defenders needed some countering since the attackers now have Thermite and Habana with wall breaching capabilities. Smoke's gas canister can now be thrown like normal frag grenades, which I think is great. The reason I haven't used Smoke myself very much because I felt that throwing his smoke grenade away, that the reason Smoke's gas canisters can now be thrown like normal grenades. Before Smoke's gas canisters were thrown very much like C4. They used the same throw curve, but now apparently now in 5.2 they have replaced the curve with a normal frag grenade throw curve. So throwing Smoke's gas grenades is going to be far more intuitive, at least for me, and I think it's going to be far more useful because it can be deployed in a much faster way. I think that's great indeed. And lastly, with the operator changes, we have Blackbeard. Now I guess this is the more controversial of the changes. They've nerfed his shield down from 150 points to 60, so that's less than half. They've increased his aim down sights from 0.25 seconds to 0.7 seconds. They've also increased his aim down sights while sprinting from 0.35 seconds to 0.8 seconds. So this is going to make him a little bit more sluggish when he's doing anything, and his shield is not nearly going to be so useful. Now, as I said, there's a lot of controversy and a lot of discussion on the Reddit about this at the moment, about what people think. But I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. It's going to remain for the rest of the season to see how this really plays out. But before this patch, Blackbeard was very powerful when it came to peeking and holding corners. In very many situations, he was able to take more than 2 operators out because they just couldn't kill him because he had his shield. So people would tend not to pick, oh, there's a Blackbeard at the window, let's not even try. I think with a shield health of 60, 2 or 3 shots will be able to take that out. And yeah, so he's going to have to be much more precise when he's aiming. It'll give him that one shot advantage before the shield gets taken down, and then he'll have an additional shield. So yeah, that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Moving on to weapon balancing, I think the most important of these changes in the weapon balancing that I want to talk about is with Glaz. They've increased Glaz's rate of fire from 110 to 220, so they've nearly doubled, well, just over doubled his. So I think the biggest of these operator changes. So I think the biggest of these weapon changes, or not that any of them are less important, but the one I want to talk about is with Glaz. They have basically doubled his fire rate. I think this is going to make him much more useful and much more easy to get those chain shots with quick moving targets, and I think that's definitely nice. They've changed a lot of the operator's weapons in the game. As I said, I'm not going to read through all of these because the list is quite long. But just to give you an idea, Caveira's gun rise has been decreased by 41%. Her first shot recoil has been reduced by 22% for mouse and keyboard. If we look at Frost, for example, her gun rise has been decreased by 12%. Her first shot recoil reduced by 22%. Maximum recoil reduced by 22%. And centering time increased by 213%. They say it looks intense, but it's extremely low, and that we shouldn't feel too much change. But anyway, these are the kind of changes you can expect to find with Caveira, with Frost, the UMP 45, with Castle Pulse and the FBI recruits. And even this list, if I keep reading this, it's going to go on and on. So it's relatively long. There are a lot of changes. For those of you who play those specific operators, it's probably a good idea just to click on the link below on the patch notes and find out exactly what these changes are. But I think for the most part, these changes are for the better. Then, of course, the other thing that I want to talk about is shield's resistance against explosives. Now, this is also quite a big change. As we all know, the shield operators were in dire need of a buff. They were a little bit too weak and way too easily killed by C4. But now that they've made it so if the shields get hit directly from the front, they are going to take significantly less damage. But if I read an excerpt from the patch notes here, it says, when an explosion occurs close to the shield operator, it will now take into account how much of the operator's body was protected from the explosion by the shield. Every part of the body that was fully covered by the shield will resist up to 80% of the explosion damage, and the total damage will take into account which body parts were hit. Feet and hands take less damage than the torso and head, for instance. And they go on to say that typically a nitro cell thrown in the front of a shield will be a lot less of a threat, but one that is carefully thrown behind a shield will force him to make a hard choice to look back and mitigate the damage while being exposed, or keep advancing forward and hope the explosion won't be too close. Of course, as they go on to say that this does obviously not apply to Blackbeard and Tachanka's shields. And then also they say that grenade throws are more consistent. The explosions, at least, they have recalculated the behavior of the grenades to make them more consistent with the destruction system in the game. So the impact grenade now uses a radial explosion for a more consistent hole shape. The explosions now create holes that decrease in size with distance. And the frag grenade now uses a radial explosion for damage near the frag itself and shrapnel destruction at longer ranges. So those are some of the main changes that I wanted to talk about. There are a number of gameplay fixes, of course a number of operator fixes as well, a number of level design fixes, game mode and user experience fixes, as we expect pretty much, I suppose, with every single patch in the game. So yeah, I'm pretty excited overall to see the changes to Tachanka and some of these operators and all these gun improvements. I think Rainbow Six Siege is constantly improving, and I'm really happy to see that the developers are putting so much work into balancing the game and keeping the experience an enjoyable one. But what do you guys think of some of the changes with regard to Tachanka and some of the operators, and your thoughts on the shield buffs and things like that? You can let me know again in the comment section below. Otherwise, guys, that pretty much wraps up this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I've been Charling, and I'll see you guys next time.